Class, so I have all of your images here and I've gone through them and you all have posted grades at this point. So you all know what your grade was, and now I'm going to go through and I'm going to do four critiques really, I guess. And the first will be on line, the second on shape, and the third on pattern. And then I'll look at some areas where I've seen mistakes that have been repeated, and we'll talk about ways to correct for that. So we're going to go ahead and start off with line for these first four images. And the first image is by Emmett, and this is a really phenomenal image to me. So we have the red brick wall, which has lines in it and has shapes in it. And then we have the lines, the white lines of the railing coming across here. Then we have the lines that are the shadows of the railing coming down this way. And we also have this line here. I just think this is a really smart image with all the different ways you've combined lines by just getting closer and simplifying your image. So a really great job using lines. The focus is on the back wall, so you had to choose where your point of focus would be. Would you have these lines in focus, or would you have back here in focus, which has more lines? And you chose the correct thing to have that back wall in focus. That's a creative decision. I don't think it would be wrong to have the front of it in focus. We would just lose a lot of the detail, and if this is really all about line, focusing back into the image makes sense. You have a really high ISO here. ISO is 1600, so I would bring that down. By bringing it down, it would mean you'd have to have a longer shutter speed or a wider aperture. We don't want a wider aperture here, but you're at 1/8000th of a second, so you don't have any issue with having too slow of a shutter speed. So if we brought it down from ISO 1600 to 800 to 400 to 200 to 100 even, that would be 4 stops of light. I'm counting on my fingers as I'm talking to you. And from 8,000, we could go to 4,000, 2,000, 1,000, 1/500th of a second. So you'd still have a plenty fast enough shutter speed to hand hold. And you wouldn't have any of those negative effects of digital noise, being a reduced dynamic range or having digital noise. Great job with this image. All right, this image is by Eva, and we're at ISO 2500, so a higher ISO again. 28 millimeters, f3.5 at 1/60th of a second. Now in this case, if she was just walking around and she had her camera with her, this is a good ISO to use, because if she used a lower ISO, she wouldn't be able to handhold and get a sharp image. Now, if she was going out and photographing and that was her goal here, then she should have a tripod with her, and then she could have a much longer shutter speed. She could have a 2-minute shutter speed if she needed it, in order to have a lower ISO. So technically, I would err on the side of a lower ISO and setting up on a tripod here. The exposure is a little bit dark here, and generally we want our exposures to be correct, but sometimes we can use our creative control to have a little bit of a darker image to create a mood. And we'll talk about other underexposed images in my last critique, but this is an example of using that in a creative way. So this is a really nice image, and that darker exposure works well. The light that's coming in is giving nice highlights on some of these lines of branches, and that really tells us what this is about. It tells us it's about the line and the shape that these branches are making. The image has a magenta tone to it. I thought that you might have shot this with a white balance that was off, but it looks like your white balance was an auto white balance, and maybe it was just the coloring of the light at that time that had this warmer tone to it. This image is by Vince. We're at ISO 200, 72 millimeters, f4.8 at 1/60th of a second, so all of those settings look good. The exposure here is again a little bit underexposed. I'd probably open this up a little bit more. Unlike the last image that is a little bit moodier, this doesn't have so much of a moody feel. It has more of a formal feel. So shooting it with about half a stop more exposure, 2/3 stop more exposure, is more accurate. So this is where we would want to go here. Now we have a bridge here. He got low as he photographed it, so this creates a line out of the ground that if he was just standing up, we might not notice. Then he has the lines of the bridge. He has the shape of the bridge coming back, and it's all leading us back to kind of the center, a little bit lower than center of the image. So really great use of light, is of repetition, of shape. So everything's coming together in this image. All three of your images, Vince, were really outstanding this week. And then this is the last that we'll look at for line. And this was actually put under shape, but I see this more as being about line. So this is Marcus's image. We were at ISO 400, 55 millimeters, f7.1 at 1/40th of a second. At 1/40th of a second, you might have a little bit of movement when you're shooting at 55 millimeters. Remember, we always want our shutter speed to be faster than our focal length unless we're shooting on a tripod. So if you're shooting on a tripod, no problem. But if you're hand holding this, you'd want to shoot it at 1/60th of a second or faster. So you're looking right here at 55 millimeters. So you'd want to shoot at a faster shutter speed than your focal length in order to hand hold and to assure that you'd have a sharp image. So the focus here looks good. The exposure overall is a little bit dark, but I think it works. The light is working really well because it's just highlighting each droplet of water on this spider web. So that's working really well for you. If you shot this when the light was just hard, or if you shot this and there wasn't enough light, it could really fall apart. When I'm in the morning, when I'm out and I see these spider webs that have the dew on them, sometimes you don't even really notice them until the last minute, and other times the light just hits it perfectly. So this is one of those times where the light hits it perfectly. So nice job with that. And then the lines, so we have the lines of the spider webs that are pulling us back this way and this way. We also have these lines of the leaves in the background, but because they're so out of focus, they don't create a distraction. They just add this nice second element to the image. Great job with this, Marcus.